Hello! 2 chapters today, and that would be Padfoot and Percy and the Hogwarts High Inquisitor. The Ministry is going to interfere with Hogwarts! Sorry. These chapters show us how checks and balances are supposed to come in. And that isn't, oh, we just have one person in charge of this entire school of kids who isn't being watched themselves. I think Dumbledore certainly has been watched up to this point in time. Simply because he has positions like the Deputy Headmistress McGonagall, who's watching him. We do have Ministry overview, and we also have heard about the school board that exists. So there is some checks and balances at Hogwarts. Are there checks and balances for the High Inquisitor at Hogwarts? Hell nah. Case in point, she is torturing at least one student. Also, no one's verifying her own teaching method. Doubt anyone's verifying any of these results either. So yeah, checks and balances would be a good plan. Or you're gonna have anarchy. And apparently you've chosen anarchy. Now, we're gonna see Dumbledore's army start. Also, again, an idea that wasn't really there until the Ministry planted it. Which does tend to happen. You sort of imagine the worst, and then you say it, and then somebody else goes. Aha! Good plan. In some ways, good plan, yes. But we'll talk about Dumbledore's army when we get to Dumbledore's army. Because we're not quite there yet. We just have the seed planted. And the seed planted, of course, is in response to this gigantic power move. But I do want to start with Padfoot and Percy, whose heads I could knock together and probably make very hollow-sounding noises. Like the coconuts they use for horse hooves. See, what's actually happening here is we're getting a clear show of allegiances. Percy, of course, is like very apparent. This nice long letter he sends, where he makes the assumption that Ron, because he's prefect, is like Percy. And I sort of find it interesting because Percy forgets that both Charlie and Bill were prefect before him. The two paths he lays out are the Fred and George path and the Percy path, what he says is following in my footsteps. No, Charlie and Bill were both prefects too. I think Bill was head boy. Yeah, Bill was head boy and Charlie was Quidditch captain. And they're not complete assholes. But we're then getting this list of advice that Ron should follow, which includes screw everything else but your own want to move up in the world. Like, everything he outlines is sort of like keeping the badge, getting the head boy position, and it's just like, yeah, no, glad you're assuming that Ron cares about his position in the school more than his friendships, which he's had for at least 4 years previous to this point. Being prefect is certainly newer than that. But then the interesting thing is that Padfoot's doing something comparable. He's got inside information, though he's only allowing... I find he's less clear than Percy is, which is interesting because... Of course, Percy's working with the government, it's a big government move. And then we've got this sort of resistance, but the resistance isn't actually against the government. But right now it sort of is because Umbridge, or Umbitch, as I enjoy calling her. So he's speaking a little more in code even in this moment. And he's still making the assumptions that Percy's actually making. But with Harry, because you look like your father, obviously you're exactly like him. And he's actually willing to, like Percy, reject Harry. Because Harry is not exactly this figure he has in his head. He's not willing to take the risks. See, the interesting thing is, your remembrance of James didn't involve you possibly going to Azkaban. Oh wait, except the one point that he did, he stepped in and stopped you. AKA the point in time where you sent Snape to Lupin as a werewolf, and James had to step in to save Snape's life. Actually, Harry's a lot closer to James than you'd think. But Sirius has got this ideal image in his head, just like Percy has this ideal image. And they're actually rejecting anything that doesn't fit with that image. And pushing it all aside and throwing it out as useless. And the thing is, you can't do that with people. Because people are flawed and they're individualistic and they're different from you. If they're really bad for you, yes, let them go. They're not worth holding on to. But don't let them go simply because they're not the perfect image of what you want them to be. That's selfish. So the fact that we're seeing Sirius do it, again, is really giving us a gauge on his actual personality. And it's not positive. And Percy's moving along with it too. What I find interesting, of course, is right before some very tragic moments, we are going to get something of a reconciliation. And Percy's going to get farther than Sirius is. Percy's also going to survive, so that might be the difference. Don't reject people just because they're not your ideal image. If you keep doing that, what's actually going to happen is you're going to become Umbridge. Yeah, this is interesting. The way we actually get this stepping stone, so we get Percy, we get Padfoot, and then we get this section on the High Inquisitor and her interference in all these classes. That's actually showing us, like, blown up times 1,000 of what Percy and Padfoot are actually doing. We have, in a lot of ways, smaller rejections here, and then we have these rejections en masse. We've got the government itself attempting to remove all individualistic thought from all of these people, and doing it through means of torture with Harry, means of interrogation with a lot of these professors, with rejection of any information that does not correspond with exactly what you want to see, which is happening between the Slytherins and the Gryffindors. We have some Slytherins who are saying, here's what you really want to see. And yes, those injuries do have to be taken into account, but if they're blown up out of proportion and all the positives are ignored, that's an issue. And in fact, we're getting somebody who, like I mentioned at the start of the video, has no checks and balances. They are literally so self-encompassing that they don't have anything else to watch them. Because everything else that is not them needs to be rejected, and we are going to see rejected on the violent scale. To the point that anything that is not Umbridge and her followers is then going to become just as dangerous because they're being backed into a corner. This isn't the small-scale rejection of I just lose one friend. This is a large-scale rejection of my way of life is dying and I need to fight for it. This is an issue. And it starts small, but given enough power to certain people who are willing to just rip everything apart so they can get their ideal image, even if that ideal image rejects the majority of society, that's not okay. You can't push people to the fringes and not expect them to fight back. You're going to start revolutions that way, and that's exactly what we're actually going to see happen. Umbridge has become a tyrant that Percy and Padfoot could only dream of being. And the interesting thing, and I've probably mentioned this in previous videos, is that Tyrant is the one who lives in fear the most. Because everybody around them is wanting to take them down, either to take their place, or to give the world a better chance. That's exactly what's about to start happening. Umbridge, you've made the wrong choice. And you're going to keep making that choice, even into Deathly Hallows. But the interesting thing is, you're never going to win. Tyrants are always going to fall. It might take us a while to collapse them, but we'll bring them down. Especially when we work together. I'm going to keep reading, and I hope you do too. See you next time.